My name is Alan Reeves. I'm 39 years old, a project director for a mid-sized logistics firm in St. Louis. I've spent the last 11 years building process maps, managing teams across time zones, fixing things no one else wanted to touch. Quietly competent. Not flashy, not political. Just the guy who made deadlines happen and kept vendor relationships from burning down. The one who replied to emails at midnight, ran point when the servers went down, and never took a real vacation. People said I was steady, reliable, unremarkable in a way that made everything run smoother. 3 weeks ago, my 8-year-old son, Caleb, came home from school with a stomachache. We thought it was a virus. Kids get sick. By the second day, he had a fever. By the third, he couldn't stand. ER, blood tests, confusion. They moved fast, but not fast enough. It was meningococcal meningitis, the aggressive strain. By the time we fully understood what we were facing, he was already unconscious. He never woke up. 3 days later, he was gone. Just gone. Like someone turned off the sun and forgot to warn the sky. The funeral was held at a quiet chapel near Forest Park, with stained glass that caught the morning light in blue and gold streaks. Family had flown in. My wife Emma sat beside me, a small crumpled shape in a black dress that didn't belong to her, borrowed last minute. I'd printed the photo for the program myself, Caleb in his Halloween costume last year, a cardboard robot we'd built together. The pastor's words blurred behind the humming in my head. My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket during the final hymn. I almost ignored it. Almost. But some instinct, the kind you only develop after years of crisis management, made me check. It was from HR, no greeting, no sympathy, just a subject line. Notice of termination, position redundancy. Inside was a PDF attachment and 2 sentences explaining that my role had been eliminated, effective immediately. No severance listed, no next steps. Just a legal footer and the timestamp, 10:17 a.m. I stared at the screen until the choir stopped singing, then powered off the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. I didn't tell Emma. Not yet. I stood, adjusted my tie, and helped carry my son's casket down the aisle. The day before the funeral, I called my boss, Nathan Kellerman, from the hospital parking lot. I'd been delaying it, telling myself there would be time later. But after signing the death certificate and speaking to the funeral director, I realized I owed at least a formal notice. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hey, Alan. What's up?" The same clipped tone he used in meetings when his attention was already elsewhere. "My son passed away this morning," I said. "The funeral is tomorrow. I'll be out this week." A pause, then, "Jesus. I'm sorry to hear that. That's rough." He cleared his throat like he'd swallowed wrong. "Of course. Take all the time you need. We'll handle things on our end." His words had the shape of sympathy, but none of the weight. "Let me know if there's anything we can do," he added. And before I could answer, he said he had to jump to another call. I didn't expect flowers. I didn't need a condolence basket. But I thought maybe someone from work would at least show up. No one did. At the funeral, as Emma spoke with the pastor near the front pews and people drifted past us with murmured apologies, I stood near the chapel doors, needing air but not ready to step outside. That's when my phone buzzed again. A message from Lexi, one of the new hires I'd trained last quarter. "I'm so sorry to text you right now, but are you okay? I think they're already interviewing someone for your job. I don't know what's going on, but it doesn't feel right." I read it twice, then locked the phone without replying. The sound of organ music drifted in from the sanctuary. I looked over at my wife. She was kneeling, hands clasped, praying to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. They hadn't even waited for the dirt to settle. I stepped outside into the cold, stared at the overcast sky, and let the wind hit my face until I could breathe again. Then I went back inside and sat beside Emma. My phone stayed off for the rest of the service. For a while after the funeral, I convinced myself I'd misread the email, that maybe it was a clerical mistake. Some automated message sent in error by a bloated HR system nobody bothered to program with basic decency. My brain kept replaying that subject line, like it was a riddle I hadn't solved yet. Notice of termination. Who sends that while a father is burying his child? Emma and I drove home in silence. Her hand rested in mine on the console, neither of us speaking. There was nothing left to say. The house was colder than I remembered. Caleb's shoes were still by the door, Velcro straps undone like he'd just kicked them off to go chase the dog. I stepped over them carefully, like stepping around a landmine. I waited until Emma had gone upstairs before I turned my phone back on. A flood of notifications poured in. Condolences, messages from extended family, a few automated reminders from work systems that hadn't caught up to the news. I opened the HR email again. Still there. Still real. I sat at the kitchen table and read it a third time. 2 sentences, clinical in tone. Due to internal restructuring, your role has been eliminated. Your employment with Delwyn Logistics is terminated effective immediately. That was it. No acknowledgement. No mention of bereavement leave. Just erased. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone across the room. I just sat there, breathing through my nose, the way I did in Afghanistan when mortar rounds hit too close. Slow, measured. Then I picked up a notepad from the drawer and started writing. April 12th. Last performance review exceeds expectations. April 19th. Praise email from Regional VP, subject line, Alan pulled off a miracle. May 2nd. Budget proposal I built saved $112,000 in Q1. May 8th. Told Kellerman about Caleb's illness. May 10th. Informed him of Caleb's death. May 11. Terminated. I didn't know what the endgame was yet, but I knew enough to recognize a setup when I saw one. Someone had wanted me out, and they'd waited until I couldn't fight back to make their move. Not yet, I thought. No calls. No replies. No reaction. Let them think I'm broken. Let them think I'm gone. The hardest part wasn't the quiet. It was the small sounds. The fridge humming. The ticking of the wall clock Caleb had insisted we hang sideways because he thought it was funny. The occasional creak of the floor upstairs as Emma moved from room to room, probably unable to sit still for too long. Grief makes people restless in different ways. I sat on the edge of the couch in yesterday's suit, tie still looped loose around my neck. My inbox had 27 unread messages. I skimmed the senders, HR, IT, Kellerman, and one from Lexi with the subject, "Are you okay?" I didn't open that one. I clicked the link to the employee portal. Access denied. Tried my VPN login. Dead. Outlook server kicked me out. Even the Slack account had been scrubbed. No name, no history, just former user. I checked the HR portal one last time. No severance information. No COBRA details. Nothing. I was gone. Not just fired, wiped clean. I opened my personal laptop, booted it to the desktop screen I hadn't changed in 5 years. A photo of Caleb and me at the lake, both of us squinting into the sun, mid-laugh. I clicked a folder on the desktop named Insurance. The name wasn't about health or life coverage. It was habit. A private backup of things that didn't belong at work but couldn't be left behind. Inside were folders sorted by year, 2017 through 2023. Each one held exported emails, performance reviews, quarterly project decks, system diagrams I'd built from scratch, meeting recordings, task logs, client call summaries. Some of it was boring. Most of it was damning. Not to me, but to the people who had taken credit for my work and passed along blame like a hot stone. I scrolled until I found a file labeled Kellerman Escalation Chain.pdf and opened it. Every time he'd promised to take my concerns up the ladder and didn't. Every budget item I'd signed off on that he'd repackaged under his name. They thought I was distracted, grieving, weak. What they didn't realize was that losing my son didn't shatter me. It refined me, burned away anything unnecessary. What was left was focus, and I was just getting started. I wasn't a flashy hire. I didn't come from a top consulting firm or wear $1,000 suits to status meetings. I was the guy who fixed what broke, often before anyone else realized it was broken. When I joined Delwin Logistics in 2012, the company was still running inventory on spreadsheets and sending delivery reports by fax. Over the years, I rebuilt their entire back-end infrastructure, from the warehouse intake system to the routing algorithms used by field drivers. Half the code running today had my fingerprints on it. The other half was stitched together by vendors I'd personally vetted and configured. No one ever asked how it all kept working. They just assumed the machine ran because it was built well, not because I quietly oiled the gears every day. What most people didn't know was that I'd been documenting everything. Not for insurance, not at first. Just because that's who I am. Every undocumented API patch, every system quirk, every workaround for the inventory sync bug they never fixed in the ERP rollout. I kept a log of it all. 1 part professional paranoia, 2 parts muscle memory. I was in the middle of updating one of those logs when I got a message from Marcus. He'd been with Delwin 6 years. A quiet guy like me, better at code than small talk. "Hey man, just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I just found out yesterday. It's messed up." I replied with a simple, "Appreciate it." 10 minutes later, another message arrived. "They're already having problems with the depot sync software. Can't get the delivery dashboard to load West Coast data. Nobody else knows how it works." Of course they didn't. Because I built that tool on my own time after they dropped the ball with the vendor and forgot to budget for system integration. Never got a bonus for it. Didn't ask. I scrolled back through my own documentation and opened a folder labeled Core Ops Internal Tools. There it was. The entire architecture, version history, dependencies, deployment chain. I could bring the system back online with 3 lines of code. But I wouldn't. Not yet. They wanted to see what I really did? Let them watch what happens when I stop doing it. 3 days after Caleb's funeral, the company announced a new hire on LinkedIn. Delwin Logistics is excited to welcome Madison Kellerman as our new Director of Special Projects. A driven, forward-thinking professional with a strong background in organizational design and transformation. No photo of her. Just a stylized banner and a block of corporate boilerplate. The last name hit first. Kellerman, same as my boss, Nathan. I clicked her profile. Madison Kellerman. No work history before this, just a vague list of internships and advisory roles. Masters in Communications from a university I'd never heard of. No mention of logistics experience. No mention of anything useful, really. I checked the internal org chart through a back door I'd built during the last system overhaul. Madison was listed directly under Nathan, not as a subordinate but as a strategic peer. That meant full access, budget authority, signing rights. She'd been set up as my equal, or more accurately, my replacement. Lexi messaged me again later that day. We had a staff call. They introduced Nathan's niece as the new face of innovation, literally used those words, said she'd be driving our Q3 transformation strategy. So that was it. I wasn't laid off because of redundancy or budget cuts. I was cleared out, quietly, surgically, so they could slot in family without interference. My absence wasn't unfortunate timing. It was the opportunity they'd been waiting for. They thought grief would paralyze me, that I'd vanish without a sound, that I'd swallow the insult like so many others over the years. Instead, I opened a blank text document and typed the header. Timeline of termination. Evidence log. I wasn't going to rant. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to show them exactly what they'd done, in order, with timestamps. One line for every lie, one line for every misstep. And when the time came, I'd give it to someone who could actually do something with it. I didn't go looking for a lawyer out of anger. I went out of necessity. There's a difference. You don't serve a decade in logistics without learning when to escalate and when to just keep your head down and gather facts. But this time, facts weren't enough. I needed interpretation. So I reached out to Rachel Lynn, employment attorney, former client, and one of the few people I trusted enough to have a conversation without it leaking. We met at a small coffee shop just outside the city, far from the office, the kind of place where no one asks questions and nobody knows your name. I brought a flash drive and a yellow notepad filled with bullet points. She brought a legal pad and eyes that didn't blink. After I laid it all out, the funeral, the email, the HR silence, she leaned back, arms crossed. They fired you while you were on bereavement leave? They never acknowledged the leave at all, I said. Just sent the email. She nodded slowly. Depending on your state's protections and the company's own handbook, that could be a violation of both FMLA and wrongful termination statutes. I thought FMLA was just for medical. It includes family death, especially immediate family. You notified them in writing? I pulled up the email on my phone. She read it, expression flat. That's enough. It doesn't guarantee you can't be fired, but it guarantees they have to follow procedure, and it sounds like they didn't. I handed her the flash drive. She plugged it into her laptop and clicked through the folders in silence. They classified your termination as voluntary, she said after a few minutes. According to this exit form, you resigned without notice for personal reasons. I didn't speak. There wasn't anything to say. They're trying to cut off your severance, your unemployment eligibility, and your legal recourse. If you hadn't kept documentation... I know, I said. She looked up. You've got a strong case, especially if you're not just looking to sue, but to apply pressure. I'm not interested in courtroom drama, I said. I just want the truth to matter. She closed the laptop. Then let's make it matter. I started by pulling every email I'd archived since 2020. Internal praise, successful project launches, times I'd gone above scope and under budget. I didn't need to embellish anything. The numbers spoke for themselves. Then I opened the Slack archive. Before I'd been locked out, I'd run a local backup, another habit picked up from too many late-night server crashes. I scrolled through message threads, finding everything from performance shoutouts to direct requests from Nathan, phrased in ways that blurred managerial boundaries. "Need you to clean this up before leadership sees it," he'd said more than once. "Make it look like ops had this handled from the start." At 2:14 a.m., I found what I hadn't expected to find: a Slack thread between Nathan and Madison. I had no right to still have access, but an old admin credential they'd forgotten about gave me just enough of a window. Nathan: "We'll move him out quietly. Use the personal leave as a natural off-ramp." Madison: "He's dead weight anyway. Never pushes back, never networks. Just a systems guy." Nathan: "Exactly. That's the kind you cut and no one notices until the lights flicker." I sat still for a long time after reading it. Not angry, not shocked, just resolved. I saved the screenshots. Then I backed them up 3 times. Cloud, encrypted USB, printed hard copies. I pulled access logs from the VPN, showing how my account was disabled the same hour HR labeled me as resigned. I compiled the timeline into a spreadsheet: dates, files, messages. The picture was clear. They didn't just fire me, they erased me. Strategically, surgically, with intention and arrogance. And they did it thinking I wouldn't fight back. That was their first mistake. By the following week, the cracks had started to show. It began with a text from Lexi. She kept it short. "Hey, weird question. What's the failover protocol for the depot sync tool?" I told her where to look in the system directory. She thanked me, then added, "It's chaos here. Nobody knows anything." Within 48 hours, I'd heard from 2 more junior employees. One was Aaron, a recent hire from the analytics team who'd shadowed me during Q1 rollout. The other was Priya, a quietly sharp back-end dev who never said much in meetings, but always delivered clean code. Aaron: "New director's lost. Keeps forwarding stuff to IT that's not even technical. Asked me today if we could unplug the cloud." Priya: "There's no documentation on half your tools. Everyone's pretending it's fine, but it's not." Aaron again: "I overheard Kellerman yesterday laughing with one of the VPs. Said your exit was surgical and no drama, exactly how you cut a dinosaur." His words. I didn't flinch. Not anymore. "Don't get involved," I wrote back to both. "Don't defend me. Don't confront anyone. Just watch and document everything." They didn't ask why. Maybe they already knew. Everyone in that office understood how much of it had been held together by muscle memory and quiet repetition, the kind no one ever thanked you for. Let the system collapse under its own weight. Let the people who replaced me feel the difference. I wasn't bitter. I was methodical. They wanted me gone. Now they could see what gone really looked like. I didn't schedule a meeting. I didn't send a reply all. I didn't fire off some angry resignation letter or post on LinkedIn about moving on to new adventures. Instead, I opened a clean Word document and titled it, "Timeline of Wrongful Termination, Alan Reeves." I wrote like an engineer, not a victim. Clean lines, specific dates, bullet points with direct evidence. April 10th. Emailed Supervisor R.A. Son's condition. May 10th. Notified company of child's death. Requested leave. May 11th. Access revoked. Employment terminated via email during funeral. May 12th. Internal email surfaced referring to me as dead weight. May 13. HR form filed as voluntary resignation. May 15th. Evidence of forged exit paperwork discovered. Attached were 47 pages of documentation, performance reviews, Slack transcripts, email headers, and 2 screenshots from the hidden admin credential showing how Madison Kellerman and Nathan planned the removal. I'd color-coded every violation of company policy, every FMLA trigger ignored, every instance where my role was labeled mission critical in budget memos. Then I drafted the email. Not to Nathan, not to HR. I sent it directly to 3 recipients: Karen Hollis, head of legal for Delwyn Logistics; Victor Yuan, the largest private shareholder on the board; Emily Durant, ethics officer listed in the annual employee handbook. Subject line: Formal notice of wrongful termination, supporting evidence enclosed. No threats, no demands, just facts, presented calmly, professionally, the way they taught us to write field reports in the Army: clear, complete, and unimpeachable. Then I logged off and waited. 3 days after I sent the dossier, the first crack surfaced. It was a nondescript envelope, certified mail. Inside was a revised separation letter from HR. The phrasing had changed. No longer voluntary resignation. Now it read, "Position terminated without cause, pending review of internal compliance policies." The phrase was a legal hedge, neutral on the surface, but beneath it was panic. The next day, Rachel called. "You're getting traction," she said. "Delwyn's legal counsel just reached out. They're asking for clarification on several timeline discrepancies you submitted." "Discrepancies," I repeated. "They're trying to reframe this as a miscommunication, that maybe there was confusion about your leave request, that maybe the termination process wasn't fully informed." I didn't laugh. I just said, "Of course they are." Internally, the tide was shifting fast. Priya messaged me. "Kellerman hasn't shown up to 3 standing meetings. Word is, legal pulled him in for a discussion. Everyone's pretending it's business as usual, but morale's in free fall. Madison tried to lead a tech review and couldn't answer basic system questions. Half the ops team has resorted to duct tape-level fixes to keep things running." Aaron added, "There's a rumor now that HR misclassified more than just your termination. Something about FMLA violations affecting 2 other employees. Compliance might be involved." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. What started as a quiet, private document had turned into a seismic shift under the foundation they thought was solid. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't burned anything down. I just lit the pilot light and stepped back. Let them sweat. Rachel arranged a meeting with Delwyn's legal team. I didn't go in person. We scheduled it over video. I kept the camera off. Their lead counsel opened with apologies for the confusion and unfortunate timing of my termination. They referenced recent events and interdepartmental communication breakdowns. I let them talk. Then I read my terms. Full severance, retroactive to the date of termination. Restoration of employment records to reflect involuntary without cause status. A formal written apology signed by Nathan Kellerman and the head of HR. Immediate termination or reassignment of Kellerman with no eligibility for internal promotion. And finally, a confidentiality agreement, drafted by my attorney, with a trigger clause that voided it if any party involved violated its terms through defamation, retaliation, or revisionist narratives in future job references. They were quiet for a moment. Then someone asked, "Is the confidentiality clause negotiable?" "No," I said. Another voice cut in. "You understand this is..." unusual. So was firing an employee during his son's funeral. Silence. Rachel closed the meeting. "They'll agree," she said later. "They're weighing liability now, not justice." "I'm not looking to humiliate anyone," I told her. "I just want it corrected. Publicly. Permanently." And if they didn't? I still had the dossier. Still had the access logs. Still had the timeline. Their move. It took less than 2 weeks. One morning, Priya sent a message with a link to an internal memo. No preamble. Just, "Thought you'd want to see this." The subject line read, "Leadership transition. Interim appointment pending." Nathan Kellerman had been placed on administrative leave, pending the outcome of an internal compliance review. The language was vague, but the intent was clear. He wasn't coming back. An hour later, Rachel forwarded me a screenshot from Delwyn's internal network. Whistleblowers had started surfacing. 2 mid-level managers from finance and 1 from HR, all submitting statements to the compliance committee. They'd known about the improper classification of terminations, had raised concerns, had been ignored. Madison Kellerman resigned the following morning. No fanfare, just a brief LinkedIn update noting she was pursuing other opportunities. She deleted the post within hours, but by then it had already made the rounds. Then came the audit. What started as a review of my termination snowballed into a full-scale investigation of Nathan's division. The findings weren't explosive, no embezzlement or wire fraud, but they were damning. Falsified performance metrics, inflated project results, undisclosed conflicts of interest, fast-tracked promotions for unqualified hires tied to board members. I wasn't surprised. Delwyn issued a public statement to stakeholders that read like an apology wrapped in legalese. "We are committed to transparency and accountability," it said. "Processes have been realigned to better reflect our core values." It didn't mention my name. It didn't have to. Everyone internally knew what had triggered the collapse. They just didn't know how much I'd held back. The call came from someone new, Executive Vice President of Operations, recently installed to help course-correct the division. She spoke calmly, carefully, like she'd been coached. "We'd like to offer you a consulting engagement," she said. "High level, remote. Your terms." I didn't answer immediately. "We're hoping you'd consider returning, even in a limited capacity, to stabilize the infrastructure. Our internal teams, well, they're struggling, and you clearly had a better understanding of the systems than anyone else." The offer was generous, more than generous. 6 figures for 3 months of part-time work, a signing bonus, guaranteed autonomy. I asked for a day to think. I spent that evening on the back porch, a mug of coffee in my hand, watching the wind stir the leaves in the yard. Emma sat beside me. The house was quiet, but not hollow. We were still learning to live with the absence, still navigating the space where Caleb's laughter used to echo. But we were doing it together. "I think I'm done," I said. She didn't ask what I meant. She already knew. The next morning, I emailed the VP. "Thank you for the offer. I won't be returning. I've used the settlement to fund a new project. One of my own design. One that doesn't require me to clean up someone else's mess. No bitterness, no explanation." I clicked send. Then I opened a new file on my laptop and titled it Phase 1, Launch Plan. 1 year to the day after Caleb's funeral, I stood outside a renovated brick building on the edge of downtown St. Louis. The windows were new, The paint still smelled fresh. A small crowd gathered in the spring air. Neighbors, local officials, donors, and friends. Emma stood beside me, one hand resting lightly on my arm, the other holding the ceremonial ribbon scissors. The sign above the door read, "The Caleb Reeves Center for Youth Innovation." Underneath, smaller words etched in steel, "In memory, in motion." The center offered after-school programs for kids with working parents, robotics kits, coding labs, music rooms, a quiet space for homework, a hot dinner. We built it from the ground up using the settlement money, some grants, and a little help from people who understood that not all infrastructure is digital. I designed every room myself, quietly, methodically. I didn't want it to feel like a monument. I wanted it to feel useful. When the speeches ended and the cameras clicked, I stepped back from the ribbon and watched a group of kids run through the front doors for the first time. They didn't hesitate. They didn't wait for permission. Emma squeezed my hand. We'd never filled Caleb's room, never tried. But his spirit was everywhere in this place, in the paint-stained floors of the art room, in the tiny circuit boards laid out in the lab, in the whiteboard that read, "Think big, start small." I still got the occasional email from former coworkers. Some were brief thank yous, some were more detailed. Promotions, escapes, stories of how the culture finally started to shift after the audit. A few apologized for not speaking up sooner. I didn't hold it against them. I'd played my part. That was enough. I never heard from Nathan again, or Madison. I didn't need to. The systems I'd built at Delwyn had long since been replaced or rewritten. That part of my life was over. What mattered now was what came after. A reporter asked me during the ribbon cutting if I'd ever imagined this place a year ago. I just smiled and said no. But later that night, when the lights were off and the doors locked, I stood in the center's main hallway and let the silence settle. They tried to erase me on the day I buried my child, but I built something that will outlive them. This story was brutal, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.